Okay, so welcome to Small Charity Week 2024. And this week we are kicking off with our session all about cybersecurity. And hopefully that will move on in just a moment. So it often comes across as something that's a little bit kind of technical, a bit difficult, a bit full of jargon. And so hopefully today what we're going to do is strip away some of that mystery for you so that you go away with some practical things that each of you can do in your charity or indeed in your insurer in terms of what you can help with practically for small charities. Okay, so my name is Michaela Leoborg and I'm the founder of Cybility, and my colleague Anna Garner, she is our lead on L&D, so learning and development, and works with me to create engaging learning experiences for people. Now, I'm just going to plow in very quickly. So a little bit of the kind of before we get into the meat of it, as it were. So we are offering 1 hour of cybersecurity consultancy free to people who win the draw, 2 winners at random who actually share some of their learning perhaps from the session on LinkedIn and tag Cybility Consulting, and then we'll let you know if you're one of those two and get you booked in for some free consultancy. So the other thing I want to mention as well is that today's session, as I say, it's quite a lot to get through, and I'd actually be very keen to make this more of a regular thing for charities, for yourselves, where we can actually dive in a bit deeper with a few people about the specific challenges that you're facing and sort of help learn that wisdom of the crowds in terms of what's happening in other charities, because that is an area that we perhaps don't do enough of in cybersecurity in particular. So if you are interested, and by the way, I will share all of these slides afterwards, so you will have all these links as well. You'll be able to register your interest on that link at our clinic for charities if you're interested. Okay, so what we're going to be doing, I'll be doing a bit of spiel around cybersecurity decoding, digging some terms. Then we're going to get a little bit interactive, and I'll be handing over, and you'll be able to do a little bit of a mini whodunnit, let's describe it that way. Then I'm going to explain to you about what we call our Cybersecurity Conductor's Companion and how you can use that as a guideline to implement cybersecurity protection practices in your organisation. And then we'll delve in a little bit deeper into some of those particular defensive measures that you can take. And then we'll just open it up for Q&A as well. Now, just to say, I'm absolutely happy if you've got any questions at all the way through, please do ask as they come up. There is an option in Mentimeter, which we will show you in just a moment, to type your questions if you prefer, or you can put them into the chat. Whatever, this session's here for you, so please do ask if you've got questions. Okay, sometimes I might just say actually it's going to come up in a minute, but if not, then I'll happily do that. Okay, let me just quickly move my chat window over 1 second. Okay, so, oh, thank you very much, Anna. So let's just take a moment to sort of think about, where are you now as individuals in relation to cybersecurity? So it might be that you're perhaps Sunny Singh, and Sunny is very keen to do the right thing when it comes to cybersecurity. But unfortunately, in his charity, he faces the challenges around not enough resources in terms of money, not enough expertise in terms of specialist understanding of cybersecurity, because cybersecurity and IT are different things. And again, it might be that you have an IT provider who's providing your IT, you don't have somebody doing it for yourself, or you might be actually the person doing it for your charity as well. And so, I say, you want to do the right thing, but you feel your hands are a bit tied. And as I'm going through these little personas, I'd like you to think about which one kind of feels close to you. And then at the end, I'd like you to perhaps pop it in the chat for me. Now, the challenge obviously for him as well is that without those things in place to support him, he can't do the right thing by the beneficiaries, and that could potentially result in a data breach, for example. And then you've got the challenges of how to actually deal with all the fallout that comes with that, and we'll talk more about that later on. Or perhaps you identify more with Belinda Ball. Now, Belinda Ball has been running the charity for a very long time, and she's got a very established volunteers training program, and she thinks, yep, this works, it'll work for everybody, one size fits all. However, actually, there are some challenges with that because all our brains are different, we learn in different ways, and we've got different things that are important to us in life as well. So it's really important to actually understand where people are at first in order to actually help them make the changes to be more cyber safe in terms of their behaviours, both at work and at home. And next, I'd like to introduce you to TikTok's Tasha. Now, Tasha has got the huge challenge of dealing with all the compliance regulations that affect the charity, and that might be both from legislation, so think about data protection, it might be from regulations. So, for example, if you work in the healthcare sector, then you've got the additional things around the NHS Data Security Protection Toolkit, for example, or perhaps you've got online prize raffles, so you've got to think about the Gambling Commission. And the challenge there is, how do you manage all that given the circumstances that charities face in terms of, again, that resource, the skill set, etc. So maybe, Tasha is where you feel you sort of sit in and identify with. Or it could be that actually you're status quo mo. Status quo mo has been, doing charity work for years, and there's nothing he doesn't know about how it works in his particular charity. But actually, he doesn't really think it's going to happen in terms of a big data breach there. It's not happened yet. Why should it happen all of a sudden now? And, actually, just wants to keep things as they are, and we'll deal with it if it happens. So out of those personas, any of them identify with you? Which ones? Would you like to pop in a chat if you're happy to do so? Or come off from I can speak, either or. But if you'd rather not, again, that's absolutely fine. Another one that's I didn't mention actually is the Chief Financial Officer, Deborah, because she's got the challenge of managing the budgets, delivering the frontline work for the beneficiaries, but also has somehow ended up with this hat of cybersecurity responsibility. How did that happen? Where's the support for it? So I'll leave you just thinking about those points and move on. So when it comes to charities, there's a few sort of pain points really. So I've mentioned some of them already in terms of the, oops, I'm going the wrong way, challenges. So the lack of expertise, as mentioned, is one. The being overwhelmed by the sense of compliance, all the different things you need to do the right thing. And let's not forget as well, you've got the Charity Commission as well as the fundraising regulator, and then you've got the marketing side as well. So lots of things go into that. You've got the resource constraints, especially recently, after COVID, more people unfortunately having to take early retirement with ill health. And then, of course, there's just people don't think about it. And it could be they're negligent because they just don't know any different. Or it could be they do it intentionally, because we do need to remember as well that fraud is a big thing, unfortunately, in charities. And there are some people who will effectively infiltrate your organisation to intentionally steal, whether it's money or data, to then sell on. Now, in terms of some of the benefits of getting cybersecurity right in your organisation, one of the key, most important things is about enhancing resilience. So what do I mean by enhancing resilience? I mean that you can have a system go down and you can still carry on delivering your services to the people that matter. That you have your plans to actually not have that be a huge kind of, oh my God, what do we do now? But just a managed process that you can actually put into place, execute, and then recover from afterwards. The benefits as well, in terms of the risk management side, are having a really good handle on what could happen in your organisation specifically, and making sure that you've got the protections in place to do that. And we'll be talking about those in the Shields Up section at the end. And then also the increased trust that you'll get, not just from your own staff in terms of thinking about, the HR side of your organisation will have information about yourselves, might be occupational health data, etc. But most importantly, your beneficiaries and the partners that you work with, because that trust is really crucial in terms of them sharing data with you as well. And of course, strategic decision making. And right now, more than ever before, especially with the sort of explosion, if you like, of artificial intelligence, it's so important to have good, reliable data. And in cybersecurity, one of the things that we're concerned about is the implications if some data is changed without authorization. What could that potentially mean? So that's another area that's really important. Any questions before I go on, actually? No? Okay, I will carry on. So one of the things that we do is we have this thing called the Cybersecurity Conductor's Companion. And what I mean by that is somebody in your charity, it could be you, it could be somebody else, is the person who's responsible for ensuring that cybersecurity risk is managed across the organisation, across the charity. And so that person we see as the cybersecurity conductor. And the idea of this model here in front of you is that it then helps them actually work through and make sure you've got all the building blocks in place to make sure your organisation is cyber resilient. I'll say a bit more about that later on. Now, why is all this so important now? Status quo mo, sitting there thinking, it's not going to happen to us, it's fine. But actually, is it? If you just look at those headlines that have popped up right now, we do have breaches happening an awful lot, and it isn't always easy to defend against them. And some of you might also think, well, hold on a minute, when you see big companies on the news getting hacked, then how can you actually manage it as a charity? And one of the key messages for you today is that even though you might be a small charity, you can still take simple steps to make it that bit more difficult for attackers to actually compromise your organisation. And as long as you're kind of one step ahead of your neighbours, as it were, then you're in a better position. Think about that analogy where you've got the bear and somebody saying they can't outrun a bear, and the other person's like, well, I don't need to worry about that, I just need to outrun you. It's exactly the same principle. Okay, so I think I've got, just another thing I wanted to mention here. You've probably seen very recently in the news about the London hospitals and how it was their third party, Synovis, that was actually compromised, and the impact that has then gone on to have. For those of you that are that third party, working with other organisations, partnering with others, do think about, are they actually reliable? Do they have at least the basics in place so that it is safe for you to share information? And be mindful that what's happened in the past few years is that criminals now aren't just kind of blocking things, but they are also actually publishing information online if they don't get their way. So that's something to just be mindful of as well. Now, if you've not, actually, can everyone just pop a 4 in the chat for me if you have already read the cyber threat report for charities? Just pop a 4 in the chat for me. Number 4. Okay, Anna, John, thank you. Right, okay. Anyone else read this? Okay, so if you haven't read it, then I would add this to your reading list, because it gives a really good coverage of both, the cybersecurity landscape in terms of the things to think about, and also some of the things that you can do as well. So I'd really recommend having a read of this. It will help you with your risk registers, definitely. So it covers things like, why is the charity sector particularly vulnerable? And, some of the reasons for that might be volunteers. We recently just produced a little guide on, how to manage cybersecurity risk in relation to volunteers, because they can be that insider threat, for example. But for me, I often think the biggest thing is just, you're working in a charity. You're doing that because you want to make a difference to society. And so we tend to be more trusting of others and willing to sort of give benefit of the doubt. And that sometimes can actually sort of get in our way a little bit in terms of thinking about some of the harms that could come from, whether it's third parties, whether it's contractors, volunteers, students, etc., different people we work with. In terms of who's going to target the charity sector, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I'm not going to mention it now, but it does go into quite a bit of depth on that in the report. It also covers about the different methods of attack, and we can look at a little bit of that later on as well. And then it also covers how to improve your cybersecurity, and we'll be doing quite a bit of that in the Shields Up section that I mentioned. So as I say, if you haven't read this, get it on your list and have a look. Now, one of the other things we've got to think about as charities is you've got your board of trustees. And, the question to you is, do you have any cybersecurity or IT expertise in your board of trustees? Do you currently report to them about cybersecurity? Do you do any training for them around cybersecurity? Because it's so important that they get it in order to then support your executive teams and everyone else in the organisation. Because if something does happen, it's likely to be the chair of that board who's on the news and having to say, what happened and what you're doing about it. Now, on the stats, I won't read them all out because you can read those for yourselves. But I think one of the most concerning things around these stats is the 16% that have formal incident response plans. And we will talk about this in a bit more and give you some guidance on how you can get that going if you haven't already. If you have got an incident response plan in place, awesome. But then are you thinking about testing it? So we've got a long way to go. I think it's fair to say things have improved, but we've still got a long way to go. Now, Anna at the start mentioned Mentimeter that we use for our audience interaction, so you can have your say. So if you've got maybe like a smartphone or a tablet or something, or if you've got different windows on your PC, you can actually see two at once, then you can always open a browser and go to www.menti.com. Either way, there's the code for you to enter, 37480354. So I'm just going to give you a little moment to do that. I'll just type the link in the chat for you.
Michaela, you have to, did you start the Mentimeter? It's in the wrong page.
Oh, hold on. Let me go to the next one.
Yeah. If you've done before, just refresh the screen and should see this question now. How do you feel when you see or hear something related to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so that's our first question. So feel free to go ahead and answer that now. Just a few moments because it might take a little bit to go in. Okay, I've got some things coming up. Keep them coming. So I've got some interesting ones here. So there's definitely a theme around, being worried and wary about all of this. Interesting that we've got a couple of sort of curious people here as well, the interested and attentive there. I think it's absolutely understandable to be confused with this area, especially as I mentioned earlier about all the jargon we have in our industry, and absolutely overwhelmed. You're dealing with your frontline delivering services. And then you've got all this stuff on top of it to worry about. And battle stations, yeah, love it. Okay, so I'd love to, you've given me an idea there, so I'll park that idea and focus on what I'm doing right now. Oh, some more stuff coming. Yep, protection leak. Yeah, absolutely. Doubtful. Is there anyone who'd like to actually just expand on the microphone a little bit about what they've said? Again, don't feel you have to, but if you'd like to, please do.
I put the battle stations.
Yeah, tell us more about that.
So I would be the first person most people in the organization would call. So I kind of instantly go, right, what do we need to do? What steps do we, what's happened? Analyze it quickly and then try and put something in quite quickly. So that's why I kind of put battle stations from my point of view.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that, John. Anybody else? No? Okay, I will move on then. But hopefully that's reassuring for you to see that, you know, you're in the same boat. Everybody pretty much is still feeling apprehensive about all of this area. Okay, so let me just move on. Yes, I've got the right one. Okay, so our next one for you, I'd like you to, on a scale, so on the left-hand side, you've got not at all aware. On the right-hand side, you've got extremely aware. So for each statement, where are you on that scale from left to right? I think for this one, I'll hide the results until you've all entered, actually.
Also remember, you have to click submit after you finish.
Oh yeah, good point. A couple of you have answered. Okay. I recognise that this one does take a little bit longer to do the dragging in your on the phone, especially. Okay. So I'm just going to reveal what we've got so far. So lots of middling around here. So in terms of the cybersecurity risk appetite and tolerance, which assets need to be protected? So a little bit more understanding around that. Current threats to protect against, that seems to be actually quite high actually compared to what we see sometimes on that one. Understanding where the weaknesses in your charity are that could be exploited. We can talk about that a bit more as well. Understanding the effectiveness of controls currently in place is actually not too bad. Oh, it's skewing as we go. Yep. Okay. And then impact of a cybersecurity incident. Yeah, that's good to see that that's in the middle there. Okay, you can still carry on entering, by the way, if you were partway through, but I will just move through in terms of time for the moment. Okay, so one of the things in cybersecurity risk is that we talk about it slightly differently to the risk that you're probably used to. It's still risk, and we all deal with risk every day when we sort of, step out the front door, across the road. But in terms of terminology, I just want to sort of get us all on that starting baseline. So we've got some terms here. So asset, threat, vulnerability, control, risk, and impact. Now, a list of beneficiary contact details. Which of those things do you think it is? Oh, really quick off the mark there. Brilliant. Oh, not bit of, is anyone going to, oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. And what you can see before your very eyes is that, you know, everyone's understanding is slightly different, which is why, you know, this is one of the things that we do look at. So in cybersecurity, the thing that we always start with is, what is it that we're actually trying to protect? Sorry, did you just come on mic a moment, Anna, and just say a couple of words?
Yeah, now just to reinforce that, now we're gonna talk about the terminology we use in cybersecurity. It's important to understand what we're protecting, or what is a risk, what is a threat. So this is the basic vocabulary the terminology that we use. So yeah, Michele is gonna explain at the end, as we go, actually.
Yeah, as we go. Yeah, so as I was saying, thank you, Anna. When we start, it's got to be from, you know, what are we trying to protect here? And so that thing that we're trying to protect, that's an asset, specifically an information asset. And it might be a system that contains lots of information, or it might be paper files if you've got, say, a whole load in the filing cabinet. But that's the asset, that's the value, it's the information itself. So a list of beneficiary contact details would indeed be an asset. So congratulations to the three of you who got that right. For the others, I completely get why you selected what you did. And as we go through, hopefully that'll make a bit of sense. If it doesn't, then please, again, either come on mic or say in the chat, because it is important to understand these things for cybersecurity. Okay, so same thing again, but this time an angry beneficiary. What might they be? So what are the typical complaints as well from a charity gets? What annoys people? Again, with the splits, yeah. Oh, more of you leaning towards the threat on this one. Oh, and we've got some other candidates coming in. Right, yes. Vulnerability, risk, and impact. So the correct answer on this one was threat. And when we think about the word threat from, again, cybersecurity perspective, it's because there's typically a person or something in the environment that is a danger to the asset. So it's a threat to the asset. And an angry beneficiary could potentially be somebody that, you know, is not happy with the service they've received, or not gotten the grant that they expected to get, something like that. And they might then, with their motivation, then actually turn on the organisation and threaten effectively the asset. So one of the things to be aware of is, for example, that buying things like denial of service as a service is very easy, and that sort of thing would take your website down. So somebody who's upset could easily go and also just buy ransomware as a service and commission somebody to affect the charity. So you know, people being unhappy is something that does need to be managed, not just from a trust and, you know, reputational point of view, but actually from a keeping your organisation running point of view as well. Okay, next one. Enforcement action from the ICO. The ICO, for those who aren't aware, is the Information Commissioner's Office, and they are responsible for holding people to account, holding organisations to account when it comes to things like data protection, use of personal data, also freedom of information, environmental information regulations as well they cover. So they are a key body for that. They do have a memorandum of understanding in place with the fundraising regulator and charities commission as well. Interesting one. Okay, I'd be really interested if anyone's happy to speak, just to say something about why they've opted for control. If not, again, don't worry, or if you want to put in the chat. But I think it's really interesting. We've got a half and half split here. So if anyone wants to share. Okay, I will take that as a no, and we will move on. So the correct answer for this one is its impact. So when an incident happens, so we've had a threat exploit something in order to gain access and compromise that asset. So let's say again, it's those beneficiary details. So if it's personal data, then you have to report that to the Information Commissioner's Office. And so potentially you could end up with a fine, which is, oh, I've gotten off the top of my head, sorry, 20 million euros or something, or 4% of your global turnover, whichever is greater. But the key thing being that if you do get something like that, they put that information on their site, and you can have the fallout from the press side as well, and the reputational damage that comes with that. And most importantly, it can also impact your funding stream. Depending on your organisation, it might mean that you're going to have some additional challenges to deal on the compliance side, but also it could just mean that you're going to lose revenue because people have lost trust in your organisation, etc. So it's all about impact, that one. What can actually impact the organisation? How does it impact people, the individuals who would have had their data potentially breached? Okay, now this one's a little bit harder. Use of personal PC for work. Where do you think that one sits? Vulnerability, that's something to pick off the mark there. Another one, oh. Is anyone going to dare to be different? So we're all going to be, oh, there we go, somebody there, thank you. Okay. So I'm just going to show you the correct answer for this one was indeed vulnerability. So congratulations to those of you that selected that one. And this is one of the big things in charities compared to the private sector. Private sector tend to have the budget to give everybody laptops, devices that are then controlled and managed from a security point of view to do their jobs. Small charities, a lot of you are probably using your own personal devices in order to do the work. For those of you who are in the fortunate situation to have the budget, then absolutely buy them and make sure they're configured securely to give to people. But for those of you not in that situation, who are using a personal PC, think about who else can access that PC. Are you all using the same login on that PC, or have you created different logins for everybody? And the information of your charity, you save it securely away from those people on that device. So that's something to think about there. And actually, I just mentioned as well, if you've got in particular teams who might be using it for gaming, quite often that's a common way of malicious software coming through. So you really don't want to be using that for charity stuff. We've got charity personal data related to it on a personal device. So something to think about. We're coming to the end of these now. unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information. What would that be based on what we've got here? A threat, a risk. Going towards risk. And this is a difficult one, actually. Let's give you a couple moments. Okay, let's see. And the correct answer is threat. So, why is this a threat rather than a risk? So, the threat is the specific thing that can happen to our assets. If you think back to what we said earlier, the threat has some sort of impact on an asset, a thing we're trying to protect. So if the thing we're trying to protect is sensitive information, and it's unauthorized disclosure of it, that is the threat, the unauthorized disclosure piece. But I did say it was a bit more difficult, that one. So whoever got the threat there, very well done on that one. And for everyone else, you can risk completely get where you would have put that, because you would see this quite often on people's risk registers written in this way. Okay, so I think this is the last one. Trained staff and volunteers. What are they based on what we've been saying so far? Interesting. Yeah, okay. Really interesting. And to be fair, I almost feel like this is a little bit of a trick question. Now, for the purposes of the quiz, I've said the control is the correct answer because we haven't covered control yet. However, it's not really wrong to say asset either, because your people are fundamental to your charity running. Your information and them having access to it when they need it is fundamental to the organisation. And both of those things are indeed assets, especially when you think about the knowledge in people's heads. So yeah, I completely sort of get why you said that, absolutely. The reason we've got it down as control though is because if we've got this threat that's going to impact an asset, how can we actually stop that from happening? And the things that we use to stop them from happening, you might see them mentioned in other risk registers as measures potentially, but in cybersecurity, we pretty much always talk about controls. Okay. And there's different types of controls, and having a mix of them is good in order to try and cover your bases. Okay, so we're just going to quickly go over those names again then. So the beneficiary contact details was an asset, the thing we're trying to protect. The vulnerability, use of personal PC for work. Threat actor, so that's a person who wants to do harm for whatever reason, whatever motivation that might be. The control are the thing that can help prevent the threat actor from exploiting a vulnerability to get to the asset. And then the threat itself is, we also use the term attack. So this is effectively the thing that is going to be done by this person in order to then exploit the vulnerability. And then finally, if all of this stuff happens, then we potentially get that negative impact. And that's just one example. So any questions around what makes up a cybersecurity risk and those aspects of, because every single one of these bits is needed really to create a risk. If you don't have an asset, there's no risk because you've got nothing to protect, for example. So make sure you get, and again, I said I'll give you these afterwards, the understanding of these terms. And when you're looking at your organisation, charity, think about, well, actually, what are we trying to protect? where are those weaknesses, those vulnerabilities? Who might be able to do something about that and attack it in a certain way? And what can we do to prevent that? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is pass over to, I'd like you to meet Detective Constable Garner, who I'm hoping is here somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
There you are.
Chief Inspector Michaela. Okay, so now we are at the CBI, the Cybility Bureau of Investigation. And you as cadets who are trainees come our cyber agents are gonna help us find out who is in charge of an attack that just occurred. So, Michael, can you share the screen again, please,
yes,
for
sorry.
us to see our suspects? So, there's just been a cyber attack, which is here in the UK, the very, very, very famous Puma library has just been attacked, had a cyber attack. But we're that good that we already have our 5 suspects, okay? So we're gonna see these suspects and you're gonna try to tell me, based on what they told us, what are their possible motivations for them to attack Puma library? Okay, so the first one we have is Raj. So Raj, what did Raj said? It's gonna come up in a second. So Raj said the Puma library didn't accept adding the book I wrote to their collection. So he wrote a book and the Puma library said was, for some reason, rejected. So what was his possible motivation? Can you please try to guess in the chat for me? I'll try to open the chat again. Aha! Yes. Okay, very well. Oh, these cadets have been very well trained. Well done. So he is probably seeking revenge. He doesn't agree with what they did, and one of his motivation can be revenge. Yes, very well. Beck said that he can be disgruntled, and we have to bear in mind that he can be a disgruntled employee, he can be a beneficiary, he can be an ex-employee. So these are all things that it can be somebody seeking revenge. Okay, next we have Lisa. She said, I strongly disagree with the library's classification of UFO sightings as fiction. Okay, because she strongly believes UFOs are for real, and therefore Puma Library is wrong. So what are her potential motivation? She's offended. Yes. It goes against something that she believes, right? Angry, yes, because she disagrees fundamentally with something that is like an ideology for her, right? So it's like ideologically against them. For this type of attacks motivation, actually, we call them hacktivists. So if you go through the if you put together the words hacker and activists, we call them hacktivists. And it's important for organizations to think about it, because sometimes we think, oh, we do good work, right? We charity, we take care after the homeless, or health of people and children. But then who can you, in the course of your action, be offending? So, and sometimes also we need to remind that maybe it's not your charity direct, but who do you do business with? Maybe they're against some association or some government, and can use your charity to go and find to go and arrive at them, use you as a vessel to attack them. Okay, and then we have this very naive or innocent looking Alex there. And what did she say? She said, I posted about the library on a dark web forum for beginner hackers. That's why she is here. So what can be her motivation? Can you put it in the chat, please? Well, that's a tough one, isn't it?
I like that, experimenting.
It could be accidental, but we suspect she has a motivation. John is like, what was she doing on the dark web? Exactly. That's what I'm asking you. What was she doing? And we put this, and it's actually true. There's some 7 or 8 years old that documented, found by the police to have conducted cyber attacked. So it's a safeguard. But why would they do that? Why 7-year-olds? Groomed by hackers? Okay, we're getting there. Getting warm. Yes, it could be to. So if they're groomed by hackers, they need to practice, right? They need to practice their hacker skills. So beginner hackers sometimes go through things that are perceived as less safe, like small charities, just to practice at their levels and try to get into some. So that's we sometimes call them script kiddies. They are less sophisticated actors in the sense that they don't have a lot of resources, but they can still infiltrate if there are some very obvious vulnerabilities there. Okay. And then we have this very nice looking, oh, I think I've seen this lady before. She's probably twin of Belinda Ball. So she is Doris. And she said, I started volunteer at the library after losing my savings. So what could be? She's great. Oh, we're getting there fast. Yes. Monetary, financial, perfect. Yes. This is, yes, perfect, spot on. So this is in fact the motivation of over 90% of actually, John, you touched on something that I forgot to say, which the overdue fines. Puma Library is losing £100,000 per day just on overdue fines because they cannot access their systems. So yes, well spotted. There are lots of consequences of cyber attack. But anyway, so financial gain for her, which is actually responsible for over 90% of the cyber attacks. And how do they get? How can they get financial benefits? What do they have to do to get? How does a cyber attack generate monies to the cyber criminals? Okay, so we have probably one of the most known other ones. If you know other ones, you can put, or you can think of other ones. Very, very, very good. Yes. So having ransomware, which is basically like, okay, I entered your system and I encrypt your files, and in order to have access back to them, you have to pay me. So that's a regular ransom. It can also be, yes, I'm going to steal your data and sell them. And one of the most valuable types of data is actually medical information. In a way, every organization that has a HR, which almost everybody can potentially have medical from the staff, right? Medical data. But especially if your charity has medical data from information, it can be very, very valuable in the dark web. Access to bank account is another one, very good. Encryption of system to get ransomware, yes. There's also identity theft. If you get data, you can commit fraud by impersonating these people that you stole a combination of information, and then apply for benefits, apply for credit cards, for credits, for different things. There's also blackmailing, which is like, okay, I have the data from your beneficiaries, from your customers, from whatever, and if you don't pay me, I will go to the ICO, so you'll be fined, or I go to the media and you lose reputation. So that's another way that they can get money. Okay, and they can also hijack the computers to go after cryptocurrency to generate more money for them, because they need lots of computers doing that. Okay, very, very well. These cadets are very, very good. And finally, we have Bob, who says, I work for the Beaver Library and I'm struggling to sell subscription. So, competitor. Sabotage, perfect,
Lovely.
perfect. So espionage, or even sometimes espionage and intellectual property theft are a real thing. These threat actors are actually usually financed by states or nations or other organizations that have money, so they're very sophisticated, and they can be after making somebody lose their reputation or go so bankrupt that they cannot continue business. Okay, so there's also another reason that somebody mentioned earlier, and it's not really a reason per se, a motivation, but it can be just an accident, right? There is a phishing email making the rounds around the world, and some arrives to one of your staff, and then they click on it. So these are some of the main motivations, and it's very important why we're talking about this. It's very important that you as an organization think who can potentially be your your threat actors, as we call. So who are the motivations for people to attack you? Is it because they strongly ideologically from what you do, or people you partner with, or there's somebody who was revenge, or just cyber criminals or competitors? And that's important for you to help define the priorities on your cybersecurity strategies. So now, in the next slide, we have an Mentimeter, and we're going to ask you, what do you think of these threat actors? Which ones should you worry about the most? And over and out. Thanks for your support in the investigation.
Thank you very much, dear Skana.
Back to Chief Inspector McKay.
So whilst you're thinking about which of these is most of concern for your charity, just to mention that for some of you might have gotten the joke around the library, because the British Library had a terrible cyber attack some months ago, and the costs associated with that just continue to pile up. If you didn't hear about it, it's worth Googling and reading about that.
Okay, so we have somebody, Claire says, what does practice mean as motivation? Is for script kiddies, those, it doesn't need to be a kid, but people who are trying to get into the hacker ring, the hacker profession, and they are practicing, or they just can have brag. So do you know the British Library or the Puma Library attack? I've done that. No worries. And just while you do as well, just say that this is like a little bit of a snippet. When we do training for staff, we actually do like a whodunit way. So we have other questions that they actually have clues that they go and investigate and try to find for the organizations. Do we have some answers now?
Yeah, let's have a little peek then. We've got 4 answers so far. Unless my screen's just not updating. Let's see. Yep, 4 so far. Financial gain, practice, ideology. I just mentioned as well that some years ago, on the ideology side of things, the activists, there was the young team who took offence to the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, and they came in through their website, if I recall, and caused a fair amount of damage. That cost them, off the top of my head, I think it was about £200,000, and that was the reduced fine from the ICA. Okay, but that's good that you've now got an idea as to what sort of things are going to matter for you, and therefore where you should target your limited resources. Thinking about, again, that risk register, get them on there, and then focus on what can we actually do about it. Okay, so right, in terms of doing something about it then. So I've mentioned already about who you are, you're the Cybersecurity Conductor. So the first thing to do in terms of initiating your work around cybersecurity is establishing that baseline. So what is it you need to protect? Who should have access to things? Where are they? Which systems are they on? There's a lot of overlap, by the way, between data protection and cybersecurity. So it might be that you're not starting from scratch. You probably have a lot of this work already done under GDPR when that came in a few years back. So it might just be a case of, revisiting some of this stuff that you've already got, and then maybe adding on some policies that you might need that you haven't got already. So that's the first thing to be doing, and thinking about, well, who does actually have responsibility for cybersecurity? And I know we always say it's everyone, but everyone needs to be aware of it and able to report if there's an incident. But who's actually driving it? That does need to be an individual in your organisation. So I'm not going to dress over the names of these, don't worry too much about that. I just want you to sort of understand the sort of 6 core steps around it. So then inoculate is all about understanding the risks to your charity. We just looked at, you know, some of the threat actors who could harm you, but it's also then going through each element of those risk blocks that we looked at and saying, well, okay, where are we vulnerable? And then again, focusing on those as well in terms of what you're going to do about them. So having a really good understanding of your information flows. Who do you share information with? How do you collect it? You know, where are the sort of risky areas in those flows? That's something that is really important to focus on up front. And then, of course, once you understand those flows and where the risks are, doing something about it. And I'm going to come to that in more depth in a moment, but embedding security into the way you work is the best thing you can do to defend your charity. Unfortunately, no matter how much money you throw at something, there is always going to be that chance that there's an incident. And the best thing you can do here is to make sure you have an incident response plan. Now, if you don't have one already, you can go to the Southeast Cyber Resilience Centre's website. They have a template there that you can take for free and complete it with your own information. Or you can work with external parties like ourselves and others who do this as well. But make sure you at least have something, because what you don't want to happen is you have an incident and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, what do we do? Okay. In part of the
I
kind
put
of
the link in the chat.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. In terms of the other thing around sort of investigate, thinking about how you handle incidents, you know, is your insurance actually covering what you want in terms of cyber cover? And they'll have their own requirements as to what defences you should have in place to make sure that they're comfortable to cover your organisation and that you are actually practicing those security things that you say you are. Multi-factor authentication is one of the big things around that, and again, we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, the next thing is interrogate. So what do I mean by interrogate? This is really where your board, so your trustees and your audit and risk committee are saying, well, how secure are we? How do we know? And actually having some assurance around what you've put in place in terms of controls to manage those risks, okay? And the next one is, oops, there we go, iterate. Now, cyber criminals, they don't stand still. And as much as I hate to say it, they're very clever, ingenious people. Some of them, they're just really creative with how they can find ways to attack people. It's really remarkable. And part of me wishes they'd kind of apply that to, you know, the good side, as it were, but hey ho. So what that means though is when you've got, say, new projects coming on board, you've got a new system, you might be working with a new supplier, you need to be thinking about, well, that's a change to our risks. So we need to go back and look at our risks and think about, what does this change mean? Have we got things in place that are actually going to manage it and cover it? Or do we actually need to think about some additional security controls because it's changing things for us? And of course, the biggest one for that recently has been the introduction of the large language models like ChatGPT and things like that. But projects and so working with partners is a key area where there's quite a lot of risk as well. Hopefully, none of you were affected by the Blackboard one I can't say last year, but time flies. My sense of time is very woolly. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of those core 6 building blocks that you can put in place in your organisation. Now, let's find out. I stress the importance of an incident response plan. So, do you have one? Let's see. thank you to whoever said no there. So you can definitely head over to that link that Anna put in the chat there and download that plan. And at least then you'll have a starting point. Yes, in draft, never tested or had to use it. Yeah, that's quite often the case. Quite often I go into clients and they have something on paper, but they've never actually tested to see if it works, or the people who were involved in putting it together are no longer with the organization and it's not been kept up to date. That's also very common. The other one that I see is they brought in somebody like me years ago to create a plan for them, only it's in a drawer somewhere, no one knows anything about it, so they might as well have not done one at all. So it's really important that once you do have a plan, you actually keep it up to date as well. Okay. So what's also interesting is, the split we've got here is actually roughly what the cyber threat report from the National Cybersecurity Centre also said. So let's try and change that percentage round and get everyone to yes, it's in draft, and then the person who's yes in draft, let's try and get you to yes, have tested in the near future. Okay.
Yeah, if I could just add something that in terms of, like, we obviously don't want anything to happen, but it's very, very important when it happens. It's quite it's quite like we tend to panic because it's very worrying and stuff, and having like a predetermined set of actions to do it's very important, because it's very common, even with seasoned professions in cybersecurity, to just the stress gets so high that everybody just start doing different things, and it can make it worse. And in cybersecurity, the faster you act, the less damage the threat can do inside your system. So it's very important, and the less costly and everything, and the impacts are less. So yeah, really important step.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My status of when, not if. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, when, not if.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So here we've got say the alternative link for the plan there, but the other thing you can do is speak with your insurer, because quite a lot of them now have both training that you can use for your staff and volunteers. Some of them as well will run an instant response test for you. Not all of them, some will. And then the other area they can also help with is in advising about, the specific controls that should be in your organization if you are wanting some additional support with that. So insurers can be very helpful on that front. We've already mentioned about documenting the plan, but the other important thing is about training your staff, training your volunteers, because they're the ones who are dealing with the information. So it's really important that they understand the plan, their role in it, and their role might just be something fails off, I'm going to report that, and I know who to report it to. It can be that simple. And obviously for the people who are in the senior management roles, who might potentially need to go down the crisis response route, that they need to understand their roles as well. And there's an interrelation, by the way, between incident response plans and business continuity plans in disaster recovery. So it might be that you don't have an incident response plan by itself, but you might already have a business continuity plan. And it might be just a case of, well, let's add a cybersecurity scenario to the business continuity plan. And then at least you've got something there that's, again, consistent with the way you operate already. So just be mindful that, again, some of this is terminology differences with our fields rather than being fundamentally different. And then the other key thing about testing the plan. Now, the National Cybersecurity Centre have been really great here in providing a free resource. And when I say free resource, I mean there's different scenario examples. They've got the PowerPoint decks you can use to actually work through a mock scenario. They've got the facilitator guide. So if you don't have knowledge yourself, you've got the sort of guidance there for it. So if your budgets are tight, which they usually are, small charities, then this is a really great way to actually test your plan and see if it's working, and then make the improvements. And as we saw, iterate being that last segment of the Conductor's Companion, and just keep going on that front. Okay, so next up,
I put in the chat as well.
thanks. Let me move on. Okay, now, if you all would like to just grab your phone and put this phone number in, if it's not already in there right now, 0300 123 2040. That's the Action Fraud line. And if there is a live cybersecurity incident happening, they can route you directly into the appropriate person who might be able to provide support for you. If you have an external IT provider, then they probably provide some basic support around cybersecurity as well. So make sure you include their details in your incident response plan. And as a small charity, you probably don't need to go to NCSC directly, but they do have a charity engagement arm that supports charities as well. So you can always reach out to them as well. Okay. Again, any questions, just do ask away. Oops, sorry. I'll just very quickly pop this up, then we will move on. So what do you think, based on everything you've heard so far, is the biggest vulnerability in your charity today? So we've got technology, people, business processes, all of the above, or no idea. So really interesting, actually, that none of you think it's the people. Would anyone like to just say why they didn't think it was people?
I put all of the above, so that kind of includes people.
True, thank you.
It also includes technology and business processes, because if a person doesn't follow the business process, then it's the business process issue as well as the people. But then again, if they're using personal device, then that's a technology issue. So it kind of encompasses them all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And the other thing just to mention actually is that the last data breach report showed that 74% of data security incidents were the result of a human factor. And that could be misconfiguration of a system, it could be accidental, all sorts of things. So I want to pick up on your comment there, Rob. In the chat, he said, I'm too new to blame anyone. And I just wanted to make something about the word blame. So in cybersecurity, blame really has no place at all, because if people are concerned that they might be blamed for clicking on the link or, I don't know, installing malware or whatever it might be, then you aren't going to get the culture that you need for people to openly say, oh, I did X, and give you that chance to actually do something about it and contain it really quickly. So it's really important in your organizations to try and promote that sense of psychological safety, that it's okay to speak up. And thank you very much. Yes, we wish you didn't click on it, but thank you for telling us. Yeah, so we can do something about it. So thank you for mentioning that, Rob. Okay, so common vulnerabilities very quickly as we come up to the end here. And just if those of you who've noticed about the number of slides at the bottom, it's because we've got lots of additional reference information for you in the slides that you can take away with you afterwards. So I don't think that we're going to go through all of those. Okay, common vulnerabilities. So one of the big ones, the weak password. Good old passwords, we're still dealing with this challenge. The current guidance from the National Cybersecurity Centre is that you use passphrases instead. And a passphrase is 3 random, unrelated words. Okay, unrelated is really key here. I personally also add that they should be a minimum of 5 characters each. And if you're an admin of systems, you really want those passphrases to be 4 random and related words, so you end up with about 20 characters. The key message here is longer is stronger, okay? You no longer have to have a mix of uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers, blah, blah, blah. It's good still if you do, because it makes it even harder. But the more important thing is that you have a long passphrase, okay? And one of the things that we do as a little trick for ourselves to memorize these is we come up with like a silly picture in our heads. So right now, for example, God knows, it's funny what has just come into my head. So right now, I've actually come up with the image of a certain politician jumping up and down on the head of a certain other politician, kind of drumming them to the ground. This is like one of those little caricatures, isn't it? And they're waving a flag as well. So my words would be the names of these particular politicians potentially, or colour of the jacket that they're wearing, and something about the flag, so I might use Britain or whatever. But a silly kind of image that you can just picture. And I recognise that not everyone can see images, by the way, so for you, use words, whatever works, but just something that help it kind of stick in your head. It is okay to write them down in a password manager, or if you've got a secure, if you're working from home and you've got a secure place that you can lock a diary or whatever. So don't worry too much about people who say, oh, you should never write them down in terms of pen and paper. The key thing is, are you securing the pen and paper? That's the thing. Okay, so next one. The other thing we see is no additional factors being enabled. So what do I mean by that? Think about your phone, and perhaps you've got a service where they send you a code that you'll need to put in order to gain access. So your username and your passphrase aren't enough. You've got to have this additional thing. And that additional thing we talk about as multi-factor authentication. So that's something you know, which in this case is the password, something you are, and that might be your face if you've got a phone that does Face ID recognition, for example, or a fingerprint recognition. So that's something you biometrically are, and something that you have. So it might be, for example, a physical little fob that you actually have to plug in to be able to log in as well. So different options out there. But the key thing that you can do for yourselves is make sure that every single web-facing system that you use, that's cloud services as well, that they have multi-factor authentication enabled. Okay, that's the most important thing. Okay, password reuse. So even now, we still see a lot of people who just use the same password on everything. Now, why is that a problem? Why does that even matter? Because, it's obviously very difficult to memorize lots of passwords. And if you don't want to faff around with the password manager, why does it matter? And it matters because we are seeing more attackers using a technique that we call credential stuffing. Now, that's when they basically buy up or have access to a database from a different breach, okay, from a particular company. So your data's in that breach from that company, and then they use that information and your password, and if you're using the same one elsewhere, that same password, and they fire those usernames and passwords at other systems to see which ones are going to let them in. And unfortunately, they actually have a very high success rate because a lot of people are still not using separate passphrases for those systems. So that's another one that's really important. You wouldn't, wear underwear twice. Don't use your passphrase twice either. Volunteers and staff aren't cyber aware. All of you, you're here today, so you definitely are more cyber aware already. But it's important that you share the message, and there's some free NCSE training on their website that's quite good that you can always do if you don't have anything in-house. Obviously, you can use external people like ourselves and others as well. And quite often as well, IT providers often have some sort of online offering that you can use. I would be an advocate for live training over that, but anyway. Insecurely configured cloud services. So this is a really big one, unfortunately. Over the past years, I would say people like Amazon and Microsoft, they're getting better at providing security by default, but quite often they don't. They start with what's easy for people, and the security options are quite often chargeable extras. And so if you don't know that going into it, you don't know that what you need to set up and configure. So the message here is, don't assume that a service you have bought is secure out of the box. It might not be. And you'll want somebody to actually go through and make sure the security configuration is protecting your information in that system. Okay. And then the next big one is the out-of-date software. So this might be on the laptops, it might be on your phone, it might be on tablets. And there's so many security vulnerabilities coming out every single day. As I said, you know, these attackers, they're so creative and clever. And the best thing you can do to protect yourself from that is, when you see that little pop-up say update your software, is to actually click on it and do update. Okay, so that's a really, really key thing. Now, these core issues and what to do about them that I've laid out here, they're actually part of what we call the Cyber Essentials scheme. And it's a government-run scheme to basically get the basics in across all organisations in the UK to try and sort of start increasing the maturity of cybersecurity and protecting everybody. Because the more we get that baseline up, the better and more secure we'll all be. And if you don't already have Cyber Essentials basic for your company, so your charity, then you can speak to your IT provider probably works with somebody that can help support you with that, or I can recommend people that do that. So it's worth doing and going through that process and making sure that all these controls that I've just mentioned are in place and you've got them configured correctly. And then as well, you get a nice little badge to put on your website saying, yes, we're Cyber Essentials. Okay, so this is the bit where I was saying there's loads of additional resources. So I'm not going to read through these because of time, but you'll be able to look at all of these links. I'll send you the slides afterwards and go through. As I said, there's also a small charity guide in addition to the training. So do have a look at that. And the Cyber Action Plan is actually a really good thing to work through, because it's like a little, almost a personal consultant that sort of takes you through questions and answers about your environment, and then gives you some actionable points from that you can then go away and do. So I would definitely recommend you having a look at that. There's also the free services that I mentioned earlier. One of the big ones is email security, which I didn't touch on. So I would encourage you to, again, when you get these, click on that link, go and have the little check your website, have it check your email and see what the recommendations are, or whether you're already secure. Okay, I've already mentioned about Cyber Essentials, loads more resources here, and I've got links to some templates and things for you as well. We do have a podcast and YouTube channel called Cybility Savvy. There's lots of videos on there. Some are long form interviews with different people, some are short form bits and pieces of advice. And then these are your key takeaways for today. So you are still a target for criminals, because they will just throw things out and see who bites. Okay, you effectively sort of collateral damage quite a lot of time, rather than somebody specifically targeting you, unless they're a hacktivist. It's probably just my dog who would like to join in the conversation. The other thing I would say is, don't let it scare you. Okay, as I say, our industry, we have so much jargon, and we really need to do a better job around communicating around this. But you can do something about security. You take one step at a time, and you'll be further ahead than you were the day before. Okay. Backups. If you're not regularly backing up your data and having a copy of it disconnected from the internet, okay, then you're still at risk in terms of that data. So that's another area that it's really important to actually have. Shush, 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 shush. I've mentioned about notifying to the Cyber Essentials scheme, and I think you probably got the message about how important incident response plans are. So if you're only going to do one thing out of the various things I've mentioned today, then that's probably the thing. That and MFA. So, actions. What have you got? Who's accessing it? As I mentioned, the MFA, go through the action plan, think about doing cyber essentials, and then you can stay up to date with some links that I've got there. So, key takeaways from this session. If you'd like to just add those in, and if you've got any questions, feel free to start asking me those now. Hi, Melon. Shush, shush, shush. So I've got a grumpy old dog there. Shush, 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 shush. Sorry about him. I think he wants some snacks.
He knows you're online and we'll give him snacks just to keep quiet.
Yeah, he has me well trained. One step at a time. Yeah, I can say. Good. Yeah, that's who was it who said the imperfect action is better than perfect inaction? I can't remember who said it, but absolutely. And inching forward. There's that lovely picture on LinkedIn that you often see, the blue background, Liz Fossen, is it her? She, you got the little steps, and then you kind of look behind yourself to see how far you've come. So yeah, absolutely. Instant plan covers all possible areas. Communicate and test it. Absolutely, great to see that. Thank you. I just have a look in the chat here as well. Sorry, thank you. Oh, good. Thank you very much. Oh, absolutely. Yes, you can get in touch as well. Yes. And, I don't know if you saw the offer at the start. Anyone who posts on LinkedIn saying something about it, we'll do a draw. So 2 people will get a free consultancy hour with me as well. So that's an option.
And the last slide, we have our LinkedIn links.
Yeah.
As well.
Actually, should I just move forward for people and then I'll come back to have a good peek at that one. So that's about that. That was the clinic that I mentioned. If we were doing it as a regular thing, so sign up and we can start doing that. We do have an online store, I should just mention, with our little cyber safety tips that you can either have as a big canvas and maybe hang it up in your office, or the mouse mats as well, reminding people what to do. And I think the last one, there you go, that's our LinkedIn. And as I said, I'll be sharing all of these slides with you afterwards as well. So let's just go back and have a little, So let's see, which ones did I miss that I've not read out? So many resources, don't feel like I'm on my own. I'm so glad to see that. Whoever said that, don't feel like you're on your own. I'm so pleased about that. That's good. Different threats to look out for. Yeah. We're going to start with great, excellent. Reducing the overwhelm. Hooray. That's another win for us. Thank you for that. Much more information. Great. Excellent. Oh, thank you very much, Claire. I'm glad you found it useful. Thank you.
We are aware of the time as well, so don't worry if you need to drop off. But if we can still be a little bit here if you want to ask some questions. Thank you all for your participation.
Yeah, absolutely.